The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us in today's webinar on managing change. We are recording this webinar and the full presentation will be posted on our website later today. Thank you to those of you who submitted questions at registration. You help us shape this webinar into what you need it to be. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can type those into the questions tab on your control panel. We will get to as many of those as we can. We'll be asking for your input during the webinar. For those of you who have access to your keyboard, we would love to get feedback from some of you. I am Mallory Price, Marketing Coordinator here at Shipley, and I will be monitoring those questions and making sure they get answered. We're glad to have Todd Barnett with us today. Todd is President and CEO of Shipley. Todd has also has leadership experience in a variety of industries and with companies of various sizes. He's been involved in several mergers and acquisitions that require significant change management and implementations. So thanks, Todd, for making time to come to this webinar today and being one of our panelists. Brad Douglas is also here. Absolutely. Brad Douglas is also here with us. Brad is Executive Vice President of Global Strategy here at Shipley, and he will moderate most of the webinar, and he brings significant experience managing and executing change initiatives, not just at Shipley, but with other employers and also clients from around the globe. So with those introductions, Brad, I will turn the time to you.
Great. Thank you, Mallory, and thank all of you for carving out some time today to join us. We'll be respectful of your time and stay within the hour and cover some what we feel are very important topics. And so Mallory and Todd, thanks for your help in putting this together. And what we'd like to accomplish in this short time is, obviously in an hour or less, we can't get into a ton of real specifics, but we want to hit at least some very basic principles that we found internally and with clients and with organizations across the globe, principles for leading and managing change. And if there's one thing that we probably all have in common, we've got people on this webinar from literally all over the world. As we look through the registration list, one thing we all share in common is we've all experienced a lot of change. A lot of change has been imposed on us, whether we like it or not, in the last couple of years. And so let's discuss some of those basic principles, try to answer some of the questions you've submitted or that you will submit during the webinar, and try and learn something together. Here you see a little quote. You know, I caught this as funny. You know, that this is not uncommon to, this is an actual statement from someone, by the way, but it's not uncommon to hear this. You know, I'm someone who really loves change. I embrace change. I welcome change. But how can I make sure that all this change doesn't disrupt my day? Well, you know, change is going to be disruptive, and we all have to accept that and go with it. And so I just found this quote to be a little bit interesting, but because human nature is, you know, don't disrupt my day, don't disrupt my work, but yeah, we need to change and want to change. So why is this topic important, and why is it relevant in business development and in general? We'll talk about that. We're going to mention some of the barriers and external factors influencing change. In fact, we're going to ask you live to type into your question box there some reasons you've seen why change initiatives sometimes fail. We're going to talk about internal organizational factors that impact change initiatives. Todd's going to walk us through some of the pillars of leading change, and we'll talk about how to try to sustain that. And then again, as we go, we'll actually be addressing as many questions as we can. If we have time at the end, we'll even address more. So I'm gonna kind of be quiet here for a minute and hope most of you are joining. You know, you're seeing the screenshots, and just put some quotes up about change and let you kind of take a look at these. Rather than read them to you, I'll just let you read through these one at a time. I like this one. In times of rapid change, experience could be your worst enemy. Isn't that so true? You know, we let our past experience taint our go forward planning. Change is inevitable. Change is tough. People don't like it, but it's necessary. Take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. Like it. Todd, you ever felt like that? Take a few aspirin, call me in the morning?
Weekly since the pandemic began, yes.
Yeah, I think we all do. Okay, so just some interesting quotes about this topic. Why do we want to address this? Well, some of you asked for us to address this. The unknown, you know, we all want to know what's around the corner and how to deal with it. Change initiatives, change in the market, change in the environment, in the competition. It impacts the way we work, the way we communicate, how we're competing, how we interact. The competitive landscape that most of us are in is in constant motion, and we better learn to change with it. Customer buying and acquisition methods, Todd, and we welcome your input on this. You know, with your broad experience in so many industries, you know, how does that impact us as business development teams or professionals in these various sectors? Technology is shifting on us. Of course, the pandemic and the global nature of that. Workforce demographics. I find this so fascinating that the demographics are shifting in many parts of the world as far as the workforce. It could be age, it could be gender, it could be ethnicity. There's just a lot of demographic changes that impact us in our working environment. So if you'll take a minute, so I know some of you are joining on mobile devices and things. You don't have access to a keyboard, but for those of you that do have access to a keyboard, would you open up the questions panel there where you can ask questions? And would you answer this question just in some short soundbite phrases, please? Just a couple of words so we're not having you type forever. But why do so many, in your experience, why do so many change initiatives fail? And then Mallory, as a few of these come in, give them a minute to respond, and then if you'll just read some of those off to us, and we'll kind of go from there. So I'll pause for a minute, give you time to enter in a few of the based on your experience. Why do many change initiatives fail? For those of you who have experienced that.
Okay,
Mallory, you got some rolling in? Okay.
We got some coming in. Unclear goals has been mentioned a few times. No buy-in. Lack of proper funding. Inconsistent communication. Communication has come up a couple of times. Investors reluctant to make changes.
Investors, okay.
Our market keeps shifting, so it's hard to know how to change. Poor leadership is another one. We're getting a lot of the same types of things in there.
Okay, that's good. I'm sure if we gave it another 10 minutes, we would get probably more of the same, but probably some new thoughts. But a lot of change initiatives that we try to take on they struggle, they fail, they fall flat. And so we thought we would take a minute to talk about some common barriers that we see, especially because of the business Shipley is in, especially in business development. You know, what are some common barriers when a company or an organization comes and says, hey, we really need to rethink our process or the way we do our work. So here are some common barriers that we see. Integration or lack of support systems. All right. If we want to change and upgrade or become more current, and we don't have the infrastructure and systems to support it, or there's no integration of systems, it becomes a likely failure. Seemingly too complex, too rigid. There's just that resistance, lack of role clarity or accountability across the organization. So no one's quite sure what role they're going to play in this. And then you, Mallory, mentioned that several people mentioned this, Mallory, inconsistent or even lack of leadership. So these are common barriers, and you all in the question box there, you hit on most of these, but these are things we need to be aware of in our organizations, whether we're small business, large business, nonprofit, education. It doesn't matter. If we're trying to get better and we're trying to improve and change, we've got to be aware that there's going to be some common barriers. Here are some other reasons why, and Mallory, I'm sure in those question tabs, these are there too. Why we often say, let's just stay the course. Let's just keep things as they are. And these are some reasons we sometimes default to that mindset. Disparate stakeholder groups, okay, various sectors, business units, organizations, maybe there's been mergers and things. There's just a natural resistance or allergic reaction, as I call it, to changing in the process. Maybe we don't have the right reward and recognition systems in place to really make it work. That's something we sometimes overlook until at the end. Personality and behavioral challenge, short-termism, leadership change, business development leadership change. We've had a new senior VP come in. She or he has a different mindset about how we ought to be doing things, but the rest of the leadership team isn't buying in. So we're gonna just stay as is and not rock the boat. Todd, given some of your background experience, any thoughts on these reasons why you've seen organizations kind of want to stay the course?
Yeah. And based on Mallory's feedback from the participants, you can really see a theme, especially for that gray and even the blending of the yellow puzzle pieces there. That we're living right now, specifically in kind of a talent exodus part of the economy where people have options and they can go places, and where you don't have strong leadership or there's turnover, it makes it really tough. It makes change difficult to have happen, and if you don't have the right reward systems in place, you've just seen it over and over again that the leadership needs to get that right. Also, Brad, I was thinking about the green puzzle piece there. I think everybody on this call that have been in the business development world here for a while have all been in organizations where maybe the leadership in the proposal department and the business development department or capture department don't see eye to eye, or they don't have a common vision. Or maybe it's even in one of the SME organizations, an engineering department, program management, finance. It makes things really chaotic, and you lose a lot of the motivation to improve things and try to make it a better system. And so I see every one of those all the time.
Oh, thank you for that. And we'll spend a little time here in just a few minutes talking about some ideas, some experiences we've had in trying to overcome some of this tendency we have to maybe not want to change. So just something you're probably, many of you are familiar with, the old Alice in Wonderland scenario where Alice goes to the Cheshire Cat, hey, would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here? She's lost, and the cat says, well, it depends a good deal on where you want to get to. Well, I don't much care where I go. Well, then it doesn't matter which way you go. And Alice says, so long as I get somewhere. And then the cat, oh, you're sure to do that if only you walk long enough. And apply this to our businesses. You know, isn't this the truth? I mean, sometimes we feel compelled, we want to change, but we really don't know which way to go. We just don't know where to go. And unfortunately, sometimes we're just going to keep on walking, keep on running, not knowing where we want to get to. It's the point here. Where do we begin? If we're going to change our behavior, our workflow, our organizational culture, whatever that change initiatives, maybe we've got to respond quicker to customer requests in shorter turnaround time, whatever that is, we've got to know where we want to get. You know, what do we need to automate? What is the end game here? And so just a simple little analogy and a little point here, but it is, if we don't know where we're going with an initiative, we'll just keep on walking. And maybe we'll know it when we get there. Maybe we'll see it, but just a caution, know where we're going. What's the end game? And then if we're in a leadership role, we need to be painfully aware that performance may take a short-term hit. You know, as we go through this process and there's some kind of change element that's introduced along the way, there may be a performance risk that we need to be aware of. And then want to spend just a little bit of time on this. And some of you, I'm sure, have seen this before. This idea that all of our workforce, there's various paths to change. And there's a legend over here you see with these eight points. You see over here to the left of this graph is where we're starting some kind of change process, change initiative. And most everyone in our organization kind of starts off as more or less a spectator. People are in kind of a wait and see mode. And then we're going to see a certain percentage of our teams start to go into this negative cycle, which is what we need to be aware of. We need to be prepared for. Some people are going to feel betrayed that we're abandoning what we've always done, doing something different. Some people are going to be in denial or really start doing, do I really want to stay employed here? Do I really want to be part of this new process or not? And then hopefully we get the bulk of our workforce and our teams looking for constructive answers, implementing solutions, and trying to move up to where we're better than we were when we started. And so you can see this path, but we're always going to have this small group of people down here that are kind of in that defiant mode of looking for negatives, promoting negatives. That's, as leaders, as team members, whatever our role in our organization, we need to try and stay on this green path. You know, we need to try to accept it, engage in it, and be part of the solution and not a naysayer, you know, not someone looking for the negatives and all the reasons it won't work. Okay, so you've probably seen that before, but this just kind of graphically shows different people take different paths to engaging in any kind of change management, whether it's business development, human resource related, design and engineering related, whatever it is. All right, Todd, I'm going to ask you if you cover the next couple of ideas and topics. And one is some common drivers that you've seen, we've experienced for why business development organizations might choose to say, hey, we've got to do something different. We've got to change the way we're doing business. And then some of the benefits we've seen as we and others have worked with organizations to try to implement change initiatives. So would you talk us through some of these key drivers?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking me to. It was good to kind of step back away from the global pandemic and think of, hopefully moving forward when the world returns a little bit, to normal, that what's really causing the market to change and what change initiatives have we been a part of, and other consulting companies that we regularly talk to. And one is that's always a consistent is there's just new markets opening all the time that interest companies, and it's interesting to try to help organizations pivot for new markets, because it does require new tactics, processes, long-term positioning. There's no doubt that that happens, and we're seeing a lot of it today. Historically, companies that were only in defense contracting are now in healthcare. A lot of new revived interest in space. We see a lot of pivots into new markets. Also, a situation that I think probably everyone on this call's been in, and that's when new leadership comes. And new leadership for some organizations might mean every 2 or 3 years. It could be quick, it could be rotational, and you can always count on kind of the signpost with new leadership saying that there'll be new priorities and there'll be change that happens because of it. Even though it slowed a little bit during the beginning of the pandemic, we're seeing that deal flow and deal activity is back up and going, and there's been some major acquisitions and mergers that have happened. Several people on our participant list that Brad and I have noticed have gone through it recently and are going through it now. You can always use that as a sign of requirements for future change. And then lastly, a lot of times, especially those of us that are in the consulting business, the reason why we do get called in is people see a trend, a troubling trend about losing business. Why are we doing that? And they need third party, eyes to give them an objective view of what it is that's potentially causing those losses. So anyways, outside of the pandemic and what we've all been through the last 2 years, we find that these 4 are really the common drivers that we see most often for these business development organizations to change. So the good news for organizations and you as leaders that can help your organization do it right, get through change processes and transformational initiatives, in a healthy, positive way. You can expect to see that your win rates will increase. We see it often. We have business cases that show that the average contract value can go up, your win rates can go up, and likewise, which is always nice to report to the finance department, the reduced cost of winning the business. You get more efficient. And you can really unify your organization around the new change and the new processes. So you really the approach to winning. So those are things that you can expect when done right. And then also, I won't go through all of these on the right, Brad, but you can also expect some of these other benefits as you change in your business development. And the last one I want to touch on, which is such an important point today when you try to attract and retain the best talent. Talent has a lot of options today, and there's no doubt a fight for talent, but you do the change management systems and processes correctly, and you don't have to be in fear of losing that talent. So I just think that's an important point to hit home.
Thanks, Todd. So yeah, we have to recognize those drivers. What in our organization may cause us to think we've got to work differently. We've got to do something different. And then there are measurable benefits if we implement and do the right things the right way. And Todd, you hit that last bullet there on the right. I'd like to just comment on that second to the last bullet. This concept of retaining the business we have. We are lucky in that we get to work with a lot of different clients in different industries, and this concept of keeping it sold and competing on recompete work and keeping the contracts, the relationships, the customers that we have is becoming so important. We no longer can neglect or take for granted that we're going to win a recompete. It's just not the case anymore. Too much change, you know, and that kind of leads us into this next topic that we want to discuss. What are some of these external changes, these external factors? You know, we've talked about some of the internal drivers, and we'll talk a little bit even more about that. But there's these external factors that are driving change. For example, there's way more information available to our potential customers, the buyer. Today, I mean, there are some statistics that are crazy. The amount of information that our customers have about us, about our solutions, about our competitors today versus what they had access to even 5 years ago is incredible. All through, you know, just disclosure and social media and websites and subscription services that track this type of thing. So our customers are changing the way they buy from us because they have access to so much more information. We can't take that for granted. Alternative acquisition processes, regardless whether we're in the government, state, local, education, whatever, federal, our customers are starting to acquire differently in many cases. And Todd, I assume, do you have thoughts on some of what we're seeing here?
Yeah, in fact, thank you. You can't overemphasize the energy that could and potentially should be devoted to a lot of these alternative acquisition processes. The companies that we see are really good at adapting and winning new business. They can adapt when, you know, one of these contract vehicles, for example, that you've listed, whether it's OTAs, FedSim, they're good at being able to respond to those and create a specialty in responding to those. Whereas others, it takes time and perhaps too much time, and they lose the competitive advantage at trying to get you know, up to speed and potentially lose a lot of acquisition dollars because of it. And I think, Brad, that those companies that can adapt and change quickly really have a competitive advantage. And you know, one of actually a couple emails that came in before the webinar asked, you know, what are some things, what are trends that you see in RFPs and proposals moving forward? You know, we see that some of these contract vehicles sometimes have a bell curve, and the popularity and how much buying agencies acquire through them, but we don't see them going away. There's a lot of activity in a lot of these alternative acquisition processes, and I think you know, one of the answers to that is you better spend some focus and time and get good at them.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Todd. Yeah, being nimble is so important. Other external factors, our customers, just like everywhere else, you know, their personnel is turning over, and Todd's mentioned talent and new faces and new places a lot, and we see this a lot in the federal government, the changeover in contracting officers and those involved in the procurement process. A lot of times they're new. They might be of a different age bracket, you know, that some of the ones we've worked in the past. So we need to be aware of that. And then regardless of whether this is public sector or private sector, our customers seem to be more concerned about risk than ever before. Making sure whoever they choose as a supplier, a vendor, a partner, presents them with the lowest risk, where we have the best chance of succeeding. So those are some of the changing customer environmental behaviors and areas that, again, as change agents, if we're engaging in some kind of change, we need to be aware of. Technology, there's way too many to even start listing here, but we've got to adapt, as Todd said. You know, there's all kinds of new communication platforms. Not only are we taking them on, but are we training our people on communication platforms? There's so much digital transformation going on, and I know you all have probably seen it or are right in the middle of it, going into different systems and transformations with technology. Automation is taking on a lot of tasks that used to have to be done manually. This is nothing new, but it's constantly different. The sophistication of technical users, as we bring in new talent to our organizations, they are often equipped with a whole new set of technical capabilities that our previous generation may not have had. What are we doing? What are we doing organizationally to make sure we're accommodating the sophistication of our new workforce? The global impact. Now this in business development is a big deal because we are able to often, because of technology, we are often able to market, sell, position ourselves globally where maybe we couldn't 3 to 5 years ago. And then Todd, you mentioned some of these online acquisition portals, these alternative acquisition methods. We've got to stay current. We've got to know what's around the corner as far as technology, systems, things that will impact. The other thing we wanted to talk about, okay, let's talk about internal drivers. What are some of those internal factors that hopefully we can control a little easier? So what internal factors influence the success or failure of a change initiative? Let's talk about some of those. Now, we showed you a couple other diagrams of human nature, of human behavior in change. And again, some of you may have seen this model before where we're starting a change initiative, right? And there's a certain percentage out here to the left that are going to be the early adopters, the innovators, all right? And boy, do we want to grab hold of those folks and help that work. So we want those people on board. The early majority, though, here, this 34%, they need to see some kind of benefit. What's in it for me? Sadly, that's true. Our people want to know not just what's in it for the company, what's in it for me, and they need to understand why, the necessity of change. Why are we doing this? These are the critical mass here that as change agents, as leaders, we need to embrace and get on board. Late majority, they need evidence, need to see the consequences, and with evidence, this group of people will be our best assets. They will become champions. And then over here to the right of this curve, you see, well, in this model, they're called laggards and immovables. I hate to use and label anybody, but there's a certain percentage that's going to really, really struggle, almost no matter what we do. Todd,
Brad,
your thoughts?
Yeah. You just made me laugh because I was thinking I've actually been in a couple of transformational efforts where they were pretty open about calling the laggards. So that was pretty funny. But great advice here that I was given early on in a merger was that you just can't waste upfront the time and energy required to try to convince laggards and immovables about the change. You really need to not step in that trap if you're going to be able to push a change initiative through. And so, it's really important for the leaders to be situationally aware and recognize kind of the team construct and how to get that momentum so you can push the change through.
Great. I'm going to push the pause button here. Mallory, have any questions that we should maybe address before we move on that anyone has submitted?
Yes, so here's one that I feel like applies to this pretty well. What can you do if employees feel the culture has changed and in a negative way? How can one gain back their confidence?
Okay. Yeah, if someone feels like the culture shifted, they've gone into that negative mode, how do we regain their confidence? I think this chart kind of shows that we need to show and provide evidence, and they will become our best assets, and hopefully this becomes part of the culture. Back over here to the more early adapters here. Help everyone see the vision. And so if someone believes that the change is negatively impacting the culture, one, we've got to pay attention to that. Because if one person raises their voice and says that's the case, there's probably dozens behind them feeling the same way. So communication and acceptance and addressing that, and trying to move people along this curve. And like Todd said, there are certain naysayers that are going to be very difficult to adopt. So I don't know if that answered the question, but this chart gives a pretty good idea of how we need to shift people. Todd, any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, well, I think we address it a little bit later here when we talk about these leadership pillars and other things that we need. I mean, that upfront vision, like you said, Brad, of leadership and being able to really have that time with your team, one-on-one direct feedback, and you got to be open and honest about performance, about expectations, about outcomes, and be sensitive to what the team's feeling. So I think all those items are just hugely important to maintain a high culture. What we do know, and the reason why I think it was just a couple weeks ago that I think it was a Deloitte study came out and said 72% of transformational initiatives fell is because that culture. So it's so important, and the leadership so important.
Good, thank you. Okay, this next little segment is more of a something you can do on your own as opposed to us spending a lot of time, and it's just kind of almost for fun. But those of you who let's see, be careful here. But clear back in 1998, let's just start there. Clear back in 1998, a little book came out called Who Moved My Cheese? So many of you are probably very familiar with this, somewhat familiar. Some of you may be, what in the heck is this? It's a simple little hardback book that was put out there. There was a little training business built around it. But it's basically a fable, if you will, about four individuals. All right, there are these two characters down below here, Hem and Haw, and there are these two mice, Sniff and Scurry. These are the characters in this fable, and they are in a maze, and they are accustomed to finding their cheese. Their cheese represents what they want in life, in business, the things that they want and like in life. Well, as the story goes along, someone moved their cheese. Their cheese moved. They could no longer go to Station C, the place where they would always find their cheese, and find cheese. And this fable is about how these four characters decided to act. How did they act when their cheese, what they wanted in business, in life, was gone? It was somewhere else. The Hems deny the change. They resist it out of fear. Hem wanted to work in a place that was safe and where changes made sense to him. Haw learned to adapt and to see something better. The Ha was hesitant at first, but then became open-minded and learned to find something new. So I'm not going to go into this and talk through the story. There's a little link to a little YouTube video that talks through the scenario, but this became a best-selling little book. You would be surprised at how many businesses adopted this as a way to help employees understand our cheese is shifting. It has moved. We can no longer compete the way we used to compete. We are not going to be successful where we were successful 5 years ago. And we can't be standing around hemming and hawing, wondering where the cheese is. So I encourage you to go find this little YouTube video, watch it. If you're not familiar with it, if you have the book on your bookshelf, pull it out, reread it. Think through it in context of what we're talking about today, managing change. So you've got the scurries of the world. We've got scurries in our organization. They're ready to go. They'll get things done. You've got the sniffs. You've got the hems and you've got the haws. And where are we? Are we on board? Are we the champion leading out? Just a fun analogy for those that have seen this many, many years ago. Refresh your memory of this. Apply it where you need to, and let it work for you. It is amazing. I'm not kidding. How many large organizations and corporations adopted this as something people could remember and apply? The lessons of the book, of the fable, are very basic. Change is going to happen. We need to be able to anticipate change, be good at anticipating change, monitor the change. How are we adapting? Adapt quickly, make the change, and enjoy it. Make it work for you. So those are the 6 lessons that come out of this story in Who Moved My Cheese. So there's your assignment. Go back, reread the book, find the book, watch that little YouTube video, and see how it applies in your organization. All right, enough of that. So Todd, I certainly like your input as we go forward here. Some of the questions that came in advance of this webinar were about leadership. And so let's talk a little bit about the role of leadership when trying to execute change. We have to be champions. We have to adopt the mantra of we're all on the same team. This isn't something being imposed on people. We need to try to rally the troops. So Todd, I'm going to ask you if you'd talk through the next couple of points here on leadership and how that applies to change, and hopefully we'll all take away some ideas from this.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We're going to present 5 ideas, and we really narrowed these down to ideas that it doesn't matter where you're at in the organization. We have a wide variety of participants here on the webinar, and it really doesn't matter what your position is. These pillars really relate to how you can help initiate and successful change in your organization. So the first bullet is be proactive. And what I really think is important about this is that if those of us that have seen a lot of changes happen, and some has been effective and some hasn't worked out well, or the results haven't hit, you recognize that a lot, if not most, of the effective changes are actually bottom-up driven. They're not top-down driven. And so it's important that at all levels that we initiate and we trigger change, and we try to push for those improvements as we try to move our organizations forward. And so just kind of a word of caution, instead of no matter where you're at in the organization, it's probably best to have a few trusted advisors to experiment ideas, bounce ideas off each other before presenting it to a larger organization or pushing it up. But it's really important to be proactive, adaptive as well. And it's sometimes not what you don't know that hurts you, but it's what you know that ain't so. That always sticks with me. Part of adaptation is, even if you don't initially agree with the change that's happening, be open-minded to it. Second is being responsive, and it's just a part of being a great teammate to those you work with and a great colleague. You got to be open to concerns and issues, and really be responsive to people. Don't shut out just because maybe a past initiative hasn't worked. The next one, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, the stabilizing force. You know, be that dependable teammate for your organization that can make sure that that whatever initiatives are being tried, even if you're kind of experimenting and don't necessarily have a clear vision, try to be that anchor for folks. The last one is be accountable. And there's going to be a few slides moving forward where we talk a lot about accountability. And I know there can be a negative kind of stigma with the word accountable, because a lot of people use it negatively a lot of the time. Be open-minded to it as we go through the rest of these slides. What we mean by it is being a great teammate, being able to be candid with each other, and, you know, in a nice, respectful way, hold others accountable so you can make progress and you can move forward. If you've ever been a part of a great team of brilliant colleagues, it's a great dynamic, and a big portion of that is making sure that everyone's accountable to each other. So this culture of accountability that we talk about, there's usually a few hallmarks that you can always see in there. And one is that you clearly define your results. Otherwise, your team is always going to have differing opinions, different definitions of what they think success looks like. So make sure you get things clear with your team first. It'll make the process easier. Create alignment around the results. Alignment is such a big challenge and one of the main reasons for frustration, and it could be you know, misalignment in processes and system and people and management. You've got to seek alignment in all of those areas that Brad's talked about previously, so you can you know, it is just kind of like being able to put it in fifth gear. It speeds things along once things are aligned. Third is instill accountability needed to deliver those results. If the results aren't coming, you just got to look back and kind of walk through these steps again and see, you know, is it a definition thing? Are we not aligned? Do people not have the resources? But reevaluate if the results aren't being delivered correctly, and then ensure that you have enough resources there to sustain the change. There's nothing worse than, you know, making all these great steps forward and then, you know, taking steps back because it's just not sustainable. So those are some ideas, some suggestions that we came up that we thought would, you know, really be able to fit everybody in each position they're in an organization.
Thanks, Todd. And let's drill down into these last two here a little bit, because they are so important, and you know, they're common terms, but we have to make the common uncommon. We have to make it work. And so accountability, and those of you that have joined previous webinars that we've done, whenever we talk about leadership in any of our webinars, whether it's proposal capture, just business in general, I've presented before this concept that came from a friend of mine's company, Partners in Leadership, this concept of an accountability line that we need to help our people understand. And this is all part of change leadership. Change management is the accountability piece. So we want people, ourselves included, we want to work above that accountability line. We want to see an issue, own it, solve it, and do it. That's what we want in our teams. Work above that line, people who will take ownership and solve issues, as opposed to what we don't want is a team of people that take these attitudes below the accountability line, where they're just like that model we showed before. I'm going to wait and see if this change initiative is going to really work for me. I'm not going to engage yet. Or they're confused. They're going to wait and just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Or you get, well, that's not my job. I really don't want to do that work. It's not my job. Or they ignore, they deny, they point fingers, or they cover their tail in some form or fashion. So we want teammates that will stay above this accountability line and not have excuses not to move an initiative forward. Now, Todd, the other point you talked about, that last bullet, was about sustaining change. And we obviously, this could be a much longer discussion, but if we're looking for the basics, and some of you wanted to know kind of some basic principles or ideas for, how to get going on an initiative, well, here's some thoughts. One is make sure we align, like Todd said, our organizational objectives with goals, that are specific, they're measurable, the old SMART goals we've all heard about. Communicate clearly, frequently, and regularly. Be agile. If your company or organization is moving into, quote, the capital A agile workflow, working environment in your design or otherwise, go with it. This involves communicating frequently and often and being supportive. Support your team, build relationships of trust and respect, balance change with stability. We did a webinar a few months back. We talked about technology and technology in business development. Hopefully some of you joined for that. But one of the points we made in that webinar was when we bring in new technology to our proposal or business development organizations, we don't need to throw everything else out. On the contrary, the technology we want to enhance what we already have. So we need to balance stability with change and not throw everything out. Use a collaborative problem resolution process, and then again, it needs to be continuous. It's work in progress. If we set bad expectations that this is going to happen overnight or in the next 30 days, and we don't achieve it, we're in trouble. We've lost credibility. So build up present our change initiatives as a continuous improvement effort. There will be key milestones that we'll measure against, that we'll achieve, and that way we can make it sustainable. So there's just a few ideas. So as we wrap up today, just a couple of quick reminders, and I'm going back to the story of Who Moved My Cheese. In summary, change is going to happen. It's unavoidable. External change, internal change. We need to be ready. We need to anticipate this change and how it will impact us and our organizations. Monitor the change, keep a record of what's going on, adapt. The more quickly, the better, as long as we're prepared and do it right. Make the change and make it fun. Do something where it's rewarding and enjoyable to people, and not something that is so painful and that they're gonna despise. And just a couple of key points again for managing change. Lack of accountability is going to bite us. It's expensive, it's counterproductive if we don't hold ourselves and our teams accountable. Change requires both leadership and careful management, the day-to-day in the trenches management. Change requires a champion at a level that can really have a voice and make a difference. and sustaining change is tough, but the winning organizations, the best organizations we've seen, you've seen, they make it work. They find a way to make it happen. So with that, Mallory, we have just a few minutes left. Let me just ask, is there any question maybe, or a couple of questions we could address, Todd or I, before we wrap it up?
Yes, so here is a rather speculative question that came, and I would like both of you to answer it. What do you foresee being the biggest challenges in the year ahead for bids and proposals? And, how does change play into those challenges?
Okay.
Can I start, Brad?
Please.
I'm so focused on the human impact of really what the pandemic's caused and all the changes and what it looks like are some real challenges in front of us still. And from what I hear and those I interact with, I just go back to what Brad said 2 slides ago. You've got to, find a way to enjoy the journey. Help your teammates. The pandemic's been more difficult on some people versus others, and make sure that I think moving forward that you help those around you. I know it's kind of a soft answer, and I know we've talked about a lot of technical things, but I just think that life's really too short if you're not enjoying the journey and making it a good practice with everybody you work with. So that would be my piece of advice, Brad.
Excellent. I think Mallory, in trying to keep this concise, I think the best practices of bid and proposal response are not going to change a lot. I mean, we have to continue to be customer focused. We have to continue to be compliant in our bids and proposals, laser focused on solving their problem, answering their questions, providing evidence. And I think the biggest challenge is the front end of building customer relationships, or in many cases, having to rebuild customer relationships on the capture side of our business development. And so it has been, the last 2 years have been somewhat challenging. Most of it, I shouldn't say all, most of it's had to be remote. And it's a little bit difficult to try to position ourselves as the best solution, the best partner, long distance. And so I see maybe that as a challenge, is maybe some of us have lulled ourselves to sleep a little bit, and we've become dependent on these long distance relationships or these virtual relationships. Well, going forward, I'm guessing, and I'm only guessing, that will start to shift back to more face-to-face, building more trust, building more confidence, and strengthening personal and interpersonal relationships with our customers and potential customers. So I see that maybe as one of the largest challenges going forward, is re-engaging in that human touch, face-to-face relationship building. That was a great question. Thank you for asking, whoever asked that. Okay, well, again, we want to respect your time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we've got some upcoming webinars as the calendar turns the page to 2022. We want to talk about being flexible and nimble in our business winning efforts, our business development activity. So we'll talk about that in February. We'll address some of the nuances perhaps of changing to become more nimble and flexible. And then in March, we're going to address color teams and stand-up reviews and share some best practices there on how we can work with our bid and proposal teams and be more effective, more customer focused. So please join us on the future. Thank you for your investment of time today and your questions. And Todd, Mallory, thank you so much, and look forward to future events. Take care, everybody, and be safe.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thanks.